The Little Prince begins not as a simple children's tale, but as a mirror held up to our inner world. The Aviator, lost in the desert, meets a child who seems to come from another star. At first glance, it feels like fantasy, a child appearing out of nowhere, asking for a drawing of a sheep. Yet beneath the simplicity lies profound psychological truth. The child represents a forgotten part of ourselves, the innocent, curious, questioning essence we often bury under adulthood. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, described this as the inner child, an archetype that carries our capacity for wonder, creativity, and emotional truth. The Little Prince is not simply a character. He is our own repressed innocence returning to challenge the seriousness, logic, and rigidity of adult life. When the Aviator first resists, saying he cannot draw, the prince insists. This is not just a request. It is a test. The child asks the adult to remember how to see, not with the eyes of logic, but with the imagination of the heart. The first psychological lesson, rediscovering wonder. We live in a world that often forces us to abandon imagination early. Schools teach us facts, society teaches us productivity, and life pushes us toward survival. Slowly, the sheep we once drew become equations, deadlines, and responsibilities. But the Little Prince reminds us, our imagination is not childish, it is essential. To imagine is to remain human, to connect with the creative force that gives meaning beyond routine. Psychologically, this first encounter tells us, do not neglect the child within, for when we silence it, we lose not only innocence, but also the ability to see possibilities beyond the obvious. A reflection for the listener. Ask yourself, when was the last time I looked at something ordinary and found wonder? Do I allow myself moments of curiosity without purpose? Have I silenced the inner voice that still asks questions others might find naive? The Little Prince challenges us to confront the fact that adulthood, while necessary, can sometimes imprison us in seriousness, disconnecting us from the joy of simple things. Why this matters. Psychologists have long emphasized the balance between maturity and play. Donald Winnicott, a psychoanalyst, once said, "It is in playing and only in playing that the individual child or adult is able to be creative and to use the whole personality." The Little Prince teaches the same. Without imagination, we shrink into mere function. With it, we expand into possibility. Thus, the first lesson of the story is not about planets or roses. It is about remembering the power of play, imagination, and curiosity, and how these are not luxuries of childhood, but necessities for fulfilled adult life. Closing reflection of Part 1. As the Aviator listens to the Little Prince's request, he reluctantly begins to draw. And in that moment, the story begins. Not only for him, but for us. The sheep is not just a sheep. It is a reminder. What we see depends on how we look. And so, the journey begins with a simple drawing that reopens a door to a forgotten part of self. The journey through planets. After leaving his own tiny planet, the Little Prince begins a journey that leads him to visit several others, each inhabited by a single adult figure. These encounters may seem absurd at first. The king who rules over nothing, the vain man who craves applause, the drunkard who drinks to forget his shame. But in truth, these figures are not strangers. They are projections of human tendencies, archetypes that live within each of us. The prince's travels are less a tour of planets and more a journey through the flaws and traps of the adult psyche. The king, the illusion of control. The first adult is a king who claims to rule the entire universe. His commands, however, are carefully aligned with what will naturally happen. If the sun is to set, he commands it to set. Psychologically, the king represents our obsession with control. Adults often cling to authority, believing that to command is to be safe. Yet, like the king, our commands often echo what is inevitable. The Little Prince reveals the emptiness of such control. True power is not in ruling others, but in governing oneself. The king is a warning. Control without self-awareness is nothing but an illusion. The vain man, the hunger for validation. On another planet lives a vain man who asks for applause constantly. He embodies a need for recognition, the fragile self-esteem that survives only through the gaze of others. Here, psychology is clear. Narcissism thrives where inner value is absent. The vain man reflects the danger of living only for external validation. Without it, he collapses. The Little Prince sees through this immediately. and in doing so, reminds us that authentic worth comes within, not from applause. The drunkard, the cycle of escape. Perhaps the saddest figure is the drunkard. He drinks to forget his shame, and when asked why he is ashamed, he replies, "Because I drink." This is a closed loop of addiction. Escape feeding shame, shame feeding escape. It is not just about alcohol. Psychologically, it represents any cycle we use to avoid facing ourselves. Overwork, distraction, consumption, or denial. The little prince feels only pity. He understands that the drunkard is trapped not by the bottle, but by his refusal to confront pain directly. A reflection for the listener. Each planet is not distant. It is a mirror of us. Where do I cling to control, like the king? When do I crave applause, like the vain man? What loops do I repeat to avoid discomfort, like the drunkard? The prince's innocence allows him to see these flaws clearly. As adults, we often rationalize them. The story strips away the excuses and forces us to ask, where am I trapped in my own illusions? Why this matters? Psychologically, these characters highlight the danger of living without reflection. Each adult has built their entire existence around one obsession. They are fragmented selves, reduced to a single drive. The little prince moves on from each of them, but he carries a lesson. To live fully, one must remain whole, not consumed by one shadow. Closing reflection of Part 2. The prince's journey through the planets is not just a child's fantasy. It is a warning for us all. Adulthood often means narrowing into patterns that become prisons. But the child within us, curious, questioning, compassionate, can still see clearly. And so, the journey deepens. Every planet a mirror, every encounter a chance for us to ask not what the adult is doing wrong, but where in our own lives we echo the same mistakes. The businessman, the tyranny of possession, on one planet. The little prince meets a businessman. He spends his days counting and recounting the stars, believing he owns them because he has claimed them. At first glance, this seems absurd. How can anyone own the stars? Yet, is it really so different from our world? Adults often spend their lives accumulating wealth, titles, or possessions that, in the end, they cannot truly hold. Psychologically, the businessman represents a compulsion to possess, a drive fueled by insecurity. The more he counts, the less he enjoys. The stars do not bring him joy. They only bring him something to protect, to count, to control. The little prince's innocence cuts through the illusion. It is of no use to own the stars if you cannot care for them. This line challenges us. Ownership without stewardship is empty. True value is not in possession, but in relationship. The lamplighter, the prison of routine. Perhaps one of the most sympathetic figures is the lamplighter. His planet is so small that a single day lasts only a minute, and so he must light and extinguish his lamp every 60 seconds. Unlike the vain man or the businessman, the lamplighter is not absurd by choice. He is trapped by duty, by an order he feels compelled to obey, even when it makes no sense. Psychologically, the lamplighter is a symbol of routine without reflection. He is the part of us that works tirelessly, follows rules, and performs tasks without questioning why. The prince admires his dedication, but also pities him. For dedication without purpose leads to exhaustion. Here lies a powerful reflection. Work becomes meaningless when it loses connection to greater meaning. The geographer, knowledge without experience. On another planet lives a geographer who records mountains, rivers, and deserts, but has never seen them himself. He depends on explorers for information, but never ventures beyond his desk. The geographer reflects the danger of intellectualism without life. Knowledge becomes sterile when it is disconnected from experience. Psychologically, this mirrors our modern tendency to consume information endlessly, books, articles, videos, without living what we learn. The geographer reminds us, wisdom is not an accumulation, but in lived experience, a reflection for the listener. Each of these adults mirrors a subtle danger of adulthood. Do I measure my worth by what I own, like the businessman? Am I trapped in routines that drain meaning, like the lamplighter? Do I confuse knowledge with wisdom, like the geographer? The Little Prince forces us to pause and ask, am I truly living or merely existing? Why this matters? These encounters are not meant to ridicule adults, but to reveal how easily we lose sight of what matters. Each adult has surrendered imagination for obsession, joy for duty, curiosity for facts. Psychologically, this is what happens when the child within us is silenced. Without curiosity, joy, and play, adulthood becomes a desert of repetition and possession. The Little Prince, by contrast, embodies integration, the reminder that innocence and wonder must live alongside responsibility and knowledge. Closing reflection of Part 3. When the prince leaves these planets, he does so with a growing awareness. Adults are not bad, but they are often blind. Blind to joy, blind to purpose, blind to the very life they are living. And so, the story prepares us for the most profound encounters still to come. The fox, the rose, and the ultimate reflections on love, loss, and what truly matters. The rose, love, and vulnerability. On his own tiny planet, the little prince has a rose. At first, he does not understand her. She is fragile yet proud, delicate yet demanding. She complains, exaggerates, and sometimes seems impossible to please. But beneath the thorns and the vanity lies something deeper. The rose loves him, though she cannot express it well. Psychologically, the rose represents the complexity of love and intimacy. Real love is not simple. It comes with fragility, pride, fear, and sometimes miscommunication. The prince, too young to understand, leaves her behind, believing she is only trouble. Yet later, through reflection, he realizes what makes the rose special is not her perfection, but the bond between them. Out of all the flowers in the universe, she is his. This speaks to us as adults. Love is not about flawless beauty or constant harmony. It is about choosing, caring, and investing in one connection, even when it is imperfect. The fox, the secret of taming. On Earth, the little prince meets the fox, and it is here that the most famous lesson of the book emerges. One only understands the things that one tames. The fox asks to be tamed, not controlled, but known, understood, and bonded with. For to tame is to create ties, to allow another being to matter in a way that changes both lives forever. Psychologically, this is the essence of attachment and intimacy. Relationships transform us because they break isolation. Once we form a bond, the other becomes irreplaceable. The fox explains, you become responsible forever for what you have tamed. This is not a burden. It is a profound truth of love and connection. To love is to accept responsibility, to allow vulnerability, and to recognize that bonds bring both joy and pain. The pain of love. The prince resists at first, afraid of the sadness that comes with attachment. If he tames a fox, then one day he will miss him. Here lies the paradox of love. To love is to risk loss. Many adults, out of fear, avoid intimacy. They choose isolation over vulnerability. Yet in doing so, they lose not only pain, but also joy. The fox teaches us that meaning is born in relationship. Without bonds, life is empty. With them, life is fragile, but full. A reflection for the listener. Ask yourself, have I allowed myself to truly bond with someone, even knowing it may bring pain? Do I confuse perfection with love, expecting roses without thorns? Am I afraid of attachment because it makes me vulnerable? The Little Prince's encounters remind us that love is both risk and reward, and that to be human is to embrace both. Why this matters. In modern psychology, attachment theory emphasizes exactly what Saint-Exupéry expressed poetically. We are shaped by our connections. Bonds give us identity, belonging, and meaning. The rose and the fox together show the two sides of love. The rose, fragile, flawed, but uniquely ours. The fox, the choice to form a bond that transforms us forever. Together, they remind us that life's deepest meaning is found not in possessions or power, but in relationships. Closing reflection of Part 4. The little prince leaves a fox, but not without carrying the secret in his heart. What is essential is invisible to the eye. It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. This lesson is not only for him, it is for us. In a world obsessed with appearances, we are reminded the deepest truths cannot be seen, only felt. The desert, a mirror of the inner void. The story begins and ends in the desert. For many, the desert is a place of death, absence, and silence. Yet in literature and psychology, the desert often symbolizes the inner void, the space where all distractions are stripped away and we are left alone with ourselves. For the aviator, stranded after his plane crash, the desert is not just a physical landscape, but a psychological state. Exhaustion, isolation, and vulnerability. It is here that he meets the little prince, suggesting that only in silence, in solitude, do we reconnect with a forgotten part of ourselves. Psychologically, the desert is the crisis of meaning many adults face. When possessions, routines, and distractions fade, we are left with deeper questions. Who am I? What matters? What remains when all else falls away? The aviator, the forgotten self. The aviator represents the adult who once was a child, who once drew pictures and dreamed, but abandoned those dreams under the weight of practicality. His crash is symbolic. Sometimes we must break down in order to rediscover what we have lost. Meeting the little prince is meeting his own forgotten innocence. The child asks for a sheep, and with it, he asks the aviator to remember imagination. Psychologically, this is a moment of integration. The aviator learns that he is not only the responsible adult who fixes planes, but also the dreamer who once drew a boa constrictor swallowing an elephant. The prince reawakens his inner child, reminding him that adulthood without wonder is emptiness. The well in the desert, finding hidden water. Later in the story, the aviator and the prince discover a well in the middle of the desert. This moment is profoundly symbolic. In the place of greatest emptiness, they find the water of life. Psychologically, this represents the idea that meaning and renewal often emerge in moments of deepest despair. When we strip away distractions, we find the essential. The well is a metaphor for the inner resources we forget we have, the resilience, creativity, and love that lie dormant until we truly need them. A reflection for the listener. Ask yourself, what is my desert? Where in life do I feel empty, lost, or isolated? Do I allow silence and solitude to teach me? Or do I rush to fill the void with distractions? Where might my own well be hidden? What inner strength or forgotten joy waits to be rediscovered? The desert is frightening, but it is also a gift. It strips us down to what matters most. Why this matters. Psychologists often describe existential crises as deserts of the soul. These moments feel unbearable, but they are also the very spaces where transformation begins. The Little Prince and the Aviator show us that healing and meaning are not found by avoiding the desert, but by entering it fully and listening to its silence. Closing reflection of Part 5. As the Aviator and the Little Prince share time in the desert, they form not only a friendship, but also a mirror. The child teaches the adult to see again. The adult, in turn, gives the child companionship in his solitude. The desert does not destroy them. Instead, it reveals the truth. Essential things are invisible, yet they sustain life like hidden water. And so, the story prepares for its most mysterious and poignant moment, the departure of the Little Prince, and the final reflection on love, loss, and memory, the mysterious departure. In the final chapters, the Little Prince prepares to leave the earth. He tells the Aviator that his body is too heavy to take back to his star, and that it will seem as though he has died. But he insists, it will look as if I am gone, but I will not be. This moment is ambiguous. Some see it as death, others as return, or even as transcendence. Psychologically, it represents the transformation that occurs when we integrate what is essential. The Little Prince does not truly vanish. He remains in memory, in heart, in the invisible ties of love. The symbolism of death and transformation. Death in this story is not finality. It is a metaphor for change, for shedding what is heavy so that the essence may live on. Psychologists like Carl Jung often spoke of symbolic death as necessary for rebirth. Parts of us must die. Illusions, fears, false identities, so that deeper truths can emerge. The prince's departure embodies this. The Aviator is left alone in the desert, but transformed. He carries the prince within him, forever changed by their encounter. Memory as presence. The story closes with the Aviator gazing at the stars. For others, they are just distant lights. But for him, they now carry laughter, innocence, and the echo of the Little Prince. This is the psychology of memory and love. Those we love never truly leave us. They live in symbols, in meaning, in the way we see the world after them. Grief, then, is not the end of love. It is proof that love has left an imprint too deep to vanish. A reflection for the listener. Ask yourself, who are the little princes in my life, the people or moments that change me forever? Do I honor their presence by seeing the world differently? By letting their lessons live on in me? Am I willing to accept that love, though fragile, is eternal in the heart? The story invites us to see loss not as erasure, but as transformation. What is essential remains, even when eyes can no longer see it. Why this matters. In psychology, resilience is often about meaning-making, transforming suffering into significance. The Little Prince leaves us with this truth. To love deeply means we will also grieve deeply, but grief itself becomes a testimony to the value of love. His departure is not meant to depress, but to awaken, to remind us that every bond, every connection, shapes us beyond time and distance. Closing reflection of Part 6. The Aviator ends his tale with a mixture of sadness and hope. He knows the Little Prince is gone, yet he also knows he will never truly be without him. And so, we too are left with this paradox. Love makes us vulnerable, but it is also the only thing that grants us eternity. The stars above are no longer silent. They laugh with the voice of a child, whispering a truth that transcends time. What is essential is invisible to the eye,